Hello friends, Adam here with FED. So, it's tier list Tuesday, which means I asked the Discord server what tier list they would like me to do. And this is one that's been requested many a time by Twillet, Falchion, and I figured might as well finally do it. This is a tier list based on difficulty curve in the Fire Emblem franchise. Now, if you want to participate in giving ideas for tier list in the future, make sure to join the Discord. The link is in the description. And also, before we get started, I'm going to ask that everyone considers subscribing. Help us reach 25,000 subs. It would mean a lot. All right. So we have 4 tiers: incredible, great, okay, bad. I will be talking about every game in the series, every mainline game. I won't be spending time on heroes or warriors games, and no Kaga sagas because I don't really feel like talking about those right now. Maybe I'll mention them briefly at the end if I'm feeling it. Anyways, let's get started. So I'm going to try and grab a game that goes in every tier really quick. I'm going to say for a great or incredible, I'm going to say an incredible difficulty curve. People might disagree with this to some degree, but I think in particular, I think this is true of 3 Houses. I think 3 Houses honestly has a really good difficulty curve. Some will say that it starts off too difficult and then kind of falls off, but I think what 3 Houses does better than most Fire Emblem games, honestly, is have the end of the game still be difficult. How many times have you gotten to the end of your FE7 playthrough and it's just kind of you just kind of stomp all over the enemies because your Marcus and your Hector and your Oswin and whoever else are just kind of busted your Raven. Just too good, right? It just makes the game too easy. And, I guess on normal and hard, it's probably not as incredible, right? Probably goes down to like great or okay. But the end game of Maddening is truly difficult. But it feels like, I don't know, maybe I have Stockholm Syndrome. Maybe I've played it too much. But it feels good to me. The curve feels good. I like being challenged in that way. So, yeah, I think 3 Houses, honestly, pretty solid difficulty curve, especially on Maddening. All right, example of a great difficulty curve. So not incredible, just great. I think I'm going to put Thracia 776 here. Thracia 776 it has like weird difficulty spikes throughout the game. Like certain chapters that like out of nowhere are way more difficult than anything else. Like the Manster Escape, your first playthrough is going to be incredibly difficult, right? Especially chapter 4. And 4X is also pretty mean. I think there are some defend chapters like chapter 14 that get newer players as well. And don't even get me started on all the warp tiles. So there's chapters throughout that are overly difficult. Like they just kind of snap at you and get you real bad. But the overall curve of the game, I think, moves pretty fluidly and is, starts off fairly easy. You have some really powerful units, and the game kind of curves in a pretty natural way to you having to use more tools and stuff that the game gives you with like warp staffs, rewarp, all that different stuff. So yeah, I think Thracia has a pretty great one. I'm not going to say it's the best in the series, but I think it is pretty great. If it didn't have those difficulty spikes like out of nowhere, then I would put it higher. All right, an okay difficulty curve. I think this is where I'm going to put Genealogy of the Holy War. Genealogy of the Holy War starts off as a kind of a stomp. Sigurd is insane, right? But once the enemies kind of start catching up to him, they never really catch up to Sigurd. Once they start catching up to him, the game gets a little more difficult. But not to any degree that's like worrisome or is going to be actually that challenging, right? So I think it's pretty good. It's like definitely isn't bad, but it isn't great by any means. I think it's just okay. And then I don't know, it's kind of a weird thing, but there's like a whole total reset on the difficulty curve once you get to part 2 of the game. And I don't know how to take that into account here. I generally like it. I like getting to part 2 and the game kind of starting over, but also the difficulty does ramp up a little bit even there. But I think the overall problem is just units can become so strong in Genealogy of the Holy War that enemies just can't keep up. It's just too easy. So I think that's the bigger problem. So overall, I think the game does have a difficulty curve to some degree. It does happen. It's just too gradual. Your units surpass anything that the game throws at you. Now, bad difficulty curve. This is one that I don't know if any of the games really have a horrendous difficulty curve, but I'm tempted here to throw something like Sacred Stones or Blazing Sword here. We'll throw Blazing Sword here. I feel like Blazing Sword has the very classic issue that early game Ellawood and Hector mode are much more difficult than late game. Yes, there are some spots that are going to get you, like Battle Before Dawn is a classic one, right? People don't like that chapter, it's pretty rough. But overall, I think it is more difficult early on, especially Hector mode. I think early Hector mode, the first couple chapters, are a lot harder there than a lot of stuff that you handle in the late game. I don't know, that could be totally wrong, and maybe this is my GBA hate bias coming out, but that's what I'm going to say for now. All right, so now let's just go through the rest of the games now that we kind of have a feel for how I feel, a feel for how I am tiering here, and now we'll get through this together here. Well, now we'll go in a chronological, release order. I think FE1 has the similar issue. Your units just get really strong or just start steamrolling. Middle of the game is really easy. Gaiden, I think, has a similar issue and has grinding, and grinding makes everything messy, right? So I think I'm also going to throw Sacred Stones there as well, because grinding just makes things messy, right? When it comes to difficulty curves. And it's hard to balance around, like, oh, look, they have infinite experience, but we also need to assume they aren't grinding to some degree. It's really I imagine that's a huge pain to try and design, so I can see why they would struggle. Sorry, I went out of order. Whoopsies. FE3, I'm just gonna put it in okay. I mean, it's similar to... yeah, it's similar to Genealogy. I mean, it ramps up. It's similar to the first game, of course, it's a remake, but also Book 2 is there, and I think Book 2 does a better job. So, we'll put it in okay. What is next here? I think FE6 actually does a pretty good job of ramping up the difficulty as the game goes on. But it doesn't do as good a job of Three Houses. Like, the enemies still fall behind your really beefy units like Rutger and Deke and Percival, Milady, whatever. I'm tempted to put it into like bottom of great, but I think I'm gonna go top of okay, because it does have some weird moments where the game gets easier. I don't know. But anytime I play that game, I feel consistently challenged throughout. So, you know, it's going to go into great. It's going into great. It has weird moments. I don't think it's perfect, but I think it's pretty good. Pretty great. All right, we already did FE7 and FE8, so we're now on to Path of Radiance. Path of Radiance is on hard mode. So Path of Radiance is like really easy in the beginning of the game, which is like, that's fine. It's a difficulty curve. You want it to be easy to start, right? But then it gets oddly difficult in random chapters, right? I'm just going to set it here for now so I don't have to keep holding it. It gets oddly difficult at random parts. Like, and I'm talking about like hard mode. That's where I have the most experience at this point with the game. Thinking the forest escape map in the early game, the prison map where you're starting to run low on weapons and stuff, and Mia shows up. I think that has an odd difficulty jump compared to other chapters preceding that. Chapter 17 is kind of a awkward jump as well. I think more than anything, that was just an awkward chapter in general. I think it just feels bad to play, and it's not like, it's dark and dreary. It makes me sad. Maybe it's just bad memories more than anything. But for the majority of the game, you just kind of use your really strong, 1-2 range units and just kind of win the game. Just run through it with Titania, Oscar. Once Ike gets Ragnall, you just kind of won the game. So it's just like kind of an all over the place difficulty curve, and I have a hard time putting it any higher than okay. But honestly, I think I have to put it into bad. I think I have to put it into bad. Okay, Radiant Dawn. Radiant Dawn is also really weird. I don't think it's as bad as Path of Radiance with it, but the structure it has with parts makes it really difficult, I think, for them to have a consistent curve. Because I think like the difficulty curve of like part 1 by itself is actually pretty good. Chapter 9 is a weird exception. I think chapter 9 is kind of a gross chapter because it's the Micaiah Black Knight solo map. I don't like that one at all. But leading up to that, you know, chapters 1 through 8 and then the end game are a really solid ramp, in my opinion. So yeah, but then you get into like part 2, and then I feel like that just kind of falls apart, right? Where you have these units are just kind of overpowered for what you're doing. Like Joffrey's charge is like, or Joffrey, is it Joffrey? Joffrey's charge is like, it seems epic and grand because there's all these units on the map and it takes a long time, but it's honestly not that hard. Like there's just a couple enemies at the end that are a little difficult, but even then, like Kieran and Joffrey can take care of them and you don't really need to worry about it. And then Endgame, like Endgame can be hard in part 2, but even then you can beat it in like 1 or 2 turns rather easily with Har, right? He just kind of trivializes the game. Part 3, I would say, has kind of I don't really feel like it has a difficulty curve. It just kind of feels stagnant in how hard it is. I can't think of any moments in part 3 where I'm like, that's difficult. Aside from the Dawn Brigade chapters, which those are just weird. But I feel like those do act as a good progression from part 1. The Dawn Brigade chapters do. It's such an awkward thing to try and think about here. And then part 4 is just a total mess until you get to the tower. So I think I enjoy it overall more than Path of Radiance, but I think I'm going to just put it in okay for now. Maybe I'll move it up. All right, Shadow Dragon. I think Shadow Dragons is actually pretty bad. Even on hard 5, the game gets remarkably easier the farther you get in. Especially once you start getting forges of effective weaponry. Game just gets easier and easier. New Mystery. I'm a New Mystery fanboy. I love New Mystery to death. And with the caveat that I've only played through it on Lunatic Reverse. So I don't know much about the lower difficulties of this game. I tend to think that it has a pretty good or great difficulty curve. Because I don't know, I like it. I think it feels good to play through. I feel like it gets harder and harder as you go on. But the thing is, it starts off stupid hard on Lunatic Reverse. And I don't have much to say about the lower difficulties. I think I'm just going to put it in okay. Yeah. No, I'm going to put it in great because personal bias. I love it. All right. Awakening, I think it has a similar issue to Sacred Stones where it's like when there's infinite grinding, how do you balance the game? Like you have to assume they're not infinitely grinding, but a lot of players do. It's impossible to really balance a campaign that way, in my opinion. Birthright, same issue. I think Conquest, actually, some of the better pacing as far as difficulty goes in the game, in the series. It has, I will say, I don't think it's as good as Three Houses. I think it has a couple of weird difficulty spikes that people will point out. I think like the Kitsune Forest is kind of frustrating. I think what chapter is the Ninja Cave? A lot of people struggle with that one. So I think it's honestly pretty good though, because it does start off relatively easy and it just like keeps getting more difficult. It never just kind of starts, it never just gets like super easy at any point. I think that is really good. Revelation is a disaster and a half. I don't know where to put this one, man. As far as difficulty goes, I think ultimately it's probably like bad, right? Because there's almost infinite grinding, but like not quite. It's weird. I don't know. Let me know in the comments where you guys would put Rev. I have no idea. I think ultimately I should put it in bad, but like where in bad, I don't know. I'm just gonna put it here. And Echoes, again, infinite grinding makes it hard to balance things. So it's like you don't grind at all on hard mode, and the enemies start to kind of outpace you a little bit. But if you grind like at all, you run the risk of just like trivializing the game. So I think normal mode's paced a lot better, but I think I'm just gonna put it in bad, but like top of bad maybe. So there's my tier list. Yeah, I think most of the series has really bad difficulty curves. I think that's just kind of the nature of the game, the kind of game it is. You know, it's hard to balance a game around like a near like what feels like infinite options as far as unit composition and characters and stuff that you can have in your army at any given time, right? So I get why it would be difficult to do this, and by no means am I a game developer that has like any talent in this. It's just I play these games, I play a lot of video games in general, so just the thought I have, I guess. Let me know in the comments, what do you think of this tier list? Do you hate it? Do you think I'm wrong? I'd love to hear what you think. Also, subscribe. Help us reach 25,000 subs. It helps us out a lot when you do, and we're trying to reach 25,000 before the end of the year, so I'd really appreciate that. And of course, like the video before you leave. It helps others find it. Thanks, friends.